For decades, the world's attention has been elsewhere: Ukraine, Taiwan, Russia, China. But while headlines scream about distant conflicts, Africa is quietly shaping the 21st century. 54 nations, 1.4 billion people, untapped mineral wealth that fuels electric vehicles, smartphones, and advanced weapon systems. It's a chessboard for global power, and most people don't even realize it. This isn't about aid or charity. It's about raw influence, technology, and control. Whoever dominates Africa's resources, infrastructure, and geopolitical networks controls the levers of global power for decades to come. The stakes are enormous. Access to critical minerals, strategic ports, and emerging markets will determine which nations lead in energy, defense, and technology over the next half-century. Africa is under quiet contestation, yet the scale of the engagement is staggering. From sprawling cobalt mines in the Democratic Republic of Congo to shipping ports in Mombasa, Lagos, and Durban, the battle for influence is everywhere. Global powers are positioning themselves not just to extract resources, but to dominate the infrastructure that underpins African economies. The continent's 1.4 billion people represent the fastest-growing workforce in the world, offering both labor and a consumer base that will shape 21st-century markets. Unlike wars covered in the international press, this one is invisible. Contracts are signed behind closed doors, deals are inked in boardrooms, and alliances are forged in diplomatic corridors. Data infrastructure, satellite networks, and industrial corridors are being deployed, quietly weaving control into the fabric of the continent. The choices African nations make today, who they partner with, which investments they accept. For every EV battery, smartphone, and high-tech weapon, Africa's resources are essential. This silent contest is shaping the foundations of global power, and the world barely notices. While Western nations debate democracy and tariffs, China has adopted a pragmatic approach. Build first, lecture never. Chinese investments in African infrastructure and energy projects exceed $150 billion, spanning railways, ports, industrial zones, and energy grids. In 23 African nations, satellites launched and maintained by China monitor skies, track resources, and support agriculture, telecom, and surveillance networks. Unlike traditional Western aid, which comes with strings attached, Chinese involvement prioritizes control, execution, and long-term economic integration. China's strategy is methodical. Long-term workforce deployment ensures projects are operational, maintained, and aligned with Beijing's strategic objectives. Ports like Djibouti, Mombasa, and Lagos illustrate China's ability to embed itself deeply into regional trade networks. Industrial corridors in Angola, Ethiopia, and Kenya demonstrate that influence is exercised not through lectures on governance, but through tangible infrastructure and supply chain control. This approach provides predictable outcomes for investors and governments alike. While the United States focuses on conditional aid, military partnerships, and short-term initiatives, China ensures that the economic and technological levers of power are firmly in its hands. By embedding itself into every stage of African development, from energy to communications, mining to transport, China is effectively scripting the continent's role in global affairs. The United States faces structural challenges in maintaining influence. Security alliances and aid programs, while valuable, are no longer sufficient against China's economic foothold. Military presence, while visible, cannot match the scale of China's long-term investment in infrastructure, mining, and data networks. Critical minerals, cobalt, lithium, tantalum, rare earths, essential for electric vehicles, semiconductors, and defense technology, are concentrated in Africa. Yet the U.S. strategy relies primarily on aid and political leverage. The American approach has historically emphasized democratic governance, conditional assistance, and short-term interventions. While morally appealing in international media, these methods are less effective in shaping the practical levers of African power. Strategic competition, a focus on short-term security, and insufficient infrastructure investment leave the U.S. lagging in securing the continent's most valuable assets. In the global race for technological, energy, and military supremacy, the lack of on-the-ground influence in Africa risks sidelining the U.S. in shaping supply chains and market dominance over the next decades. Africa is the planet's treasure chest. The continent holds roughly 30% of the world's known mineral reserves, including 80% of global cobalt, vital for electric vehicle batteries and high-tech electronics. Lithium, tantalum, rare earths, manganese, and platinum group metals, all critical to modern technology and defense, are concentrated across Congo, Zambia, South Africa, Madagascar, and Zimbabwe. Whoever controls these resources controls the raw material for the 21st century's most strategic industries. China's strategy leverages these minerals through ownership stakes, mining partnerships, and infrastructure investments. By controlling supply chains, China ensures that electric vehicle batteries, smartphones, renewable energy storage, and high-tech weaponry are dependent on its network. For ordinary consumers, the impact is tangible. Your Tesla's battery, your iPhone, or military hardware relies on minerals controlled through African partnerships. The same resources dictate who can dominate next-generation technologies. Control over Africa is control over the global tech and energy supply chains. But this story has a twist. Africa is not passive. African nations are exploiting the US-China rivalry to their advantage, negotiating deals that maximize local benefit while retaining sovereignty. Angola, Zambia, Kenya, and Nigeria are extracting concessions, demanding infrastructure, technology transfer, and favorable trade terms. Africa's leverage comes from being indispensable to global supply chains. African governments are leveraging competition to accelerate development. They reject conditional aid and favor pragmatic, results-oriented partnerships. Chinese investments offer predictable execution and fast delivery, while the U.S. provides strategic alliances and occasional aid packages. Countries are skillfully balancing both to extract maximum benefit. The continent's population, 1.4 billion strong and growing, is a strategic asset. Young, entrepreneurial, and digitally connected, Africa's workforce is increasingly shaping global innovation, manufacturing, and consumption. Africa is no longer a passive stage for global powers. It's an active player with agency, negotiating influence, and positioning itself as a decisive factor in the global economic order. The stakes could not be higher. If China consolidates influence, it will control supply chains, resource flows, and technological infrastructure across Africa. Access to cobalt, lithium, rare earths, and ports would allow Beijing to dominate renewable energy, electronics, defense tech, and global manufacturing networks. The continent becomes a lever of 21st century global power. If the US manages to counter China's influence effectively, it could prevent monopolization, ensure diversified supply chains, and maintain strategic partnerships. But failure risks ceding geopolitical power, technological leadership, and global leverage to China. For the world, this is not a distant conflict. Africa's resources power the technology you use, the cars you drive, the renewable energy grids you rely on, and even national defense capabilities. For Africans, it's the future of development, governance, and economic independence. This is a high-stakes chessboard, and the moves today will shape global power for decades. The world's future isn't being decided in Washington or Beijing. It's being decided in Lagos, Kinshasa, and Luanda. So, what can you do? First, share this video. Most people don't realize how Africa is shaping global power. Second, drop a comment. Do you think Africa will leverage its resources for independence or remain under external influence? Third, subscribe, because next week, we're breaking down how Africa is copying K-pop's playbook, and it's changing everything.